They built a gate across the only road to my land and dared to charge me for using it. 8 decades of legal easement erased overnight by a greedy HOA drowning in secret debt. They thought I'd pay. Instead, I declared war. And I wasn't alone. The reckoning started here. I've never liked surprises, especially the kind that appear at the end of a long dirt road on a Monday evening when all you want is a hot shower, a cold beer, and no human interaction. I was halfway through a bag of beef jerky driving back from town with a fresh load of fence posts in the bed of my truck when I saw it. A tall, gleaming metal gate standing smugly across the only road leading to my property. A brand new keypad blinked red at me like it already hated me, and a laminated sign zip-tied to the post flapped in the wind like a mocking flag of conquest. Notice: access restricted to HOA members. All non-members must pay $50 per entry. QR code below. At first, I genuinely thought it was a joke. Maybe some neighbor kids got real crafty, but as I pulled up closer, I saw the concrete footings. This thing was no prank. The entire gate assembly was professionally installed, cameras mounted above, motion sensors on both sides. I hadn't gotten so much as a whisper about this from anyone. No letter, no email, no neighborly heads up, just boom, steel across my road. I got out of the truck, walked up to the keypad, and jabbed a few buttons at random. Nothing. It beeped like it was laughing at me. The QR code led to some HOA payment portal asking for license plate registration and credit card info. I tried to bypass it by walking around, but even the ditches on both sides were blocked off with boulders. Someone had thought this through. Too well. Before I could start yelling at inanimate objects, a silver Lexus pulled up behind me and parked like it belonged there. The window rolled down to reveal a familiar, punchable face. Calvin Todd, treasurer of the HOA in all his glory. Tinted glasses, pink polo shirt, that permanent smirk like he's about to upsell you on a tax shelter. "Evening, Robert," he said, as if we were old friends meeting for coffee. "It's Bob," I replied flatly. "What the hell is this?" He got out of the car and did that thing smug people do. Adjusted his belt and looked around like he just bought the air. "This is progress," he said. "Starting this week, Fox Run Ridge is implementing road access control to ensure safety and generate infrastructure funds." Generate funds? You realize this road has a registered easement going back to 1947? I have legal access. It's literally in my deed. Calvin waved a hand like I was reciting a fairy tale. HOA's legal team reassessed the easement's applicability under updated zoning interpretations. The board voted to define the road as a community-managed resource. Non-members are now subject to usage fees. I blinked. You can't just redefine a damn easement. "Well," he said, pulling out his phone, "it's already done. If you want uninterrupted access, you can register your plate and set up a recurring payment. 50 per entry or a discounted package of 500 for unlimited monthly access." I laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh, more like the sound someone makes when they discover termites and black mold in the same wall. "You're blocking legal access to my land. That's illegal." Calvin shrugged. "Disputes can be submitted to the HOA Grievance Committee. They meet the second Tuesday of each month, assuming your dues are current." "I don't have dues," I snapped. "I'm not part of your damned HOA." He smiled. "Well, that might complicate things." I walked back to my truck, heartbeat rising like a boiling kettle. I could feel the blood in my neck, the pressure behind my eyes. I had to go around, a back route through unpaved trails that cut through a neighbor's property. The detour took 40 extra minutes and cost me a punctured tire on a loose fence nail. By the time I made it to my house, it was dark. I stood on my porch, looking back down the hill toward the road I was now banned from, my road, and realized this wasn't some one-time annoyance. This was war, and war required strategy. I grabbed a beer, lit a cigarette I'd sworn off 2 years ago, and walked over to my safe to dig out the old survey maps. If Calvin and his band of gatekeepers wanted to play legal hardball, then fine. I could play. But I'd play better. By the next morning, I was halfway through my second pot of coffee and already 6 phone calls deep into a bureaucratic black hole. County Recorder's Office, Transportation Department, local code enforcement, even the damn DMV. Nobody knew anything and nobody wanted to get involved. Every call ended the same way. "That sounds like a civil matter, sir." Of course it did. You could drive a monster truck through the loopholes HOAs operate in, and somehow it would still be your fault for not yielding. I pulled the old easement deed from my fireproof safe, a yellowed but perfectly legible document dating back nearly 80 years. It was simple, clear, and ironclad. The road, regardless of who owned it, carried a permanent right-of-way in favor of Parcel 17. My land. Period. No expiration, no exceptions. Signed, sealed, and filed with the county. I scanned it, printed copies, highlighted the relevant sections, and decided to pay a visit to the HOA headquarters. A converted model home with delusions of grandeur and a weekly board brunch catered by someone's Instagram-famous wife. When I walked in, the receptionist looked up like she'd seen a ghost in work boots. "Do you have an appointment?" "Nope," I said, placing the document on the desk like I was slapping down a royal flush. "But I have legal access to a road your people are blocking, and I'm not leaving until I speak with someone who understands the difference between a driveway and a federal offense." 10 minutes later, I was escorted into a glass-walled office where Sharon Brixton, HOA president and walking stereotype of white wine at 11 a.m., waited with a polite but surgical smile. Her nails matched her folder tabs. That should have been my first red flag. "Mr. Manning," she began, using my full name like we were at a tax audit. "Thank you for coming in. Calvin mentioned you had concerns." "Yeah. I'm concerned your HOA is extorting money for road access that isn't legally yours to restrict." She clasped her hands like a kindergarten teacher about to tell a 5-year-old why his drawing of a dragon didn't follow the rubric. The board voted unanimously to implement usage fees for non-members. We are a private community with shared infrastructure costs, and your property benefits from our maintenance. My property has its own maintenance, and that road's legally bound by easement. You can't charge for what you don't own." Sharon's smile stayed, but her voice cooled. "We've reviewed the easement. Its language is ambiguous." "It's not. You just don't like what it says." She stood. "If you'd like to appeal the board's decision, you may file a petition. Otherwise, you'll need to pay for access. Non-compliance may result in permanent suspension of entry privileges." That phrase, entry privileges, made my jaw tighten like a vice. It was my goddamn driveway. Back home, I fired off an email to a local attorney who specialized in land use and easements. Christina Pope, recommended by a rancher I trusted, got back to me within the hour. She read the easement and said in her words, "They don't have a legal leg to stand on, maybe just a very loud mouth." She agreed to take my case. I sent her everything I had: documents, photos of the gate, QR code links, screenshots of the payment site. Within a day, she filed an initial cease and desist letter to the HOA demanding immediate removal of the paywall and restoration of unrestricted access. The response? A form email. "Thank you for your inquiry. The board will review your submission at the next monthly meeting." I nearly put my boot through my laptop. Later that week, things got weirder. I started getting automated emails from the HOA. Notice of outstanding payment. 3 unregistered road usages total due $150. With a cheery little note at the bottom. Failure to pay may result in referral to collections. Collections. For using a road I've had access to longer than most of these people have been alive. But it didn't stop there. I noticed security cameras had been installed near the gate. Not just 1, but 3. Mounted high, angled specifically to catch plate numbers coming and going. They were logging every car, not just mine, everyone's. Then came the real gut punch. That Friday, I found out my gate code had been deactivated. I'd registered with the emergency access system years ago in case a fire crew needed entry. Now it was gone, erased. I had to drive around again, this time at night in the rain. My truck's undercarriage took a beating on the back trail. When I got home, headlights still on, I saw something shiny nailed to the oak by my gate. It was another notice, laminated, weatherproofed, and zip-tied tight. Unauthorized access routes may result in trespassing charges. HOA security will be notified. They were watching me, and I wasn't the only one. The next morning, my neighbor, Tony, who lived just on the HOA's outer edge, came by while I was checking fence lines. "You got a minute?" he asked, lowering his voice. "You know that whole toll gate crap?" "Yeah, it's not crap, it's extortion," he nodded. "Well, I got a cousin who works maintenance for the HOA. They're not just covering road costs, they're trying to plug a hole. Big one. Something about unexpected IRS flags and operational shortfalls. It's all hush-hush. But this toll thing, it's their Band-Aid." My blood went cold. "Tony," I said slowly, "you telling me they're shaking people down to fix their taxes?" He glanced around. "I didn't say that, but you didn't hear it from me." He walked off like a man who just confessed to a felony. I stood there for a long time, the wind rustling through the trees, the silence almost loud. So this wasn't just about some gate. It was about money and fear and something festering beneath the vinyl siding and regulation shrubbery of that pristine little neighborhood. Something I was about to dig into with both hands. The following Monday, I met Christina Pope in person at a little diner just off the interstate. She was younger than I expected, sharp-eyed, and spoke like someone who'd been ignored one too many times by people in suits. She didn't waste breath on pleasantries. "They think they're clever," she said, flipping through the file I'd handed her. "But they're not. The easement holds. However," she paused, tapping her pen on a printed screenshot of the HOA's road access policy page. "They're playing dirty, redefining access under new infrastructure zoning bylaws, classifying the road as a privately maintained thoroughfare used solely for HOA benefit." I snorted. "Used by them, built by my grandfather's tractor in 1946. Doesn't matter. Their claim doesn't invalidate yours, but it muddies the water. That's their strategy. Confuse the process long enough for you to give up or pay." "Then they don't know me," I said. She smiled at that, slid me a document. "This is a formal demand for injunctive relief. If they keep blocking your access after this, we move to emergency court order." I signed it without hesitation. We filed it the same day. 2 days later, I got a phone call from someone I hadn't expected to hear from. A woman named Lucy Rivera, special agent with the IRS's Criminal Investigations Division. Her tone was brisk, professional, with an undercurrent of satisfaction. Like she'd been waiting for someone to drop this case into her lap. "Mr. Manning, I'm reaching out regarding a complaint involving the Fox Run Ridge Homeowners Association. Your name came up as a witness in an active investigation." "Happy to be a witness," I said. Hell, I'll rent a megaphone if you need it. She chuckled. That won't be necessary, yet. But I'd like to meet. Tomorrow morning? We met in a conference room at the regional IRS office. She walked in with a laptop, a legal pad, and a look that could pierce drywall. But behind that, I saw something else. Personal fire. As we went through my documentation, I asked, "What's the real story here? Why's the IRS suddenly interested in HOA toll gates?" She paused, then said, "Off the record?" I nodded. A few years ago, my dad owned a modest house in Arizona. His HOA tried to force him out over a shed that had been there since Reagan was in office. He ended up losing that house after a flood of violations. Turned out the president of the HOA had been using community funds to finance a cabin in Tahoe. We tried to press charges, nobody cared. She leaned forward. "I care now." And just like that, I knew I wasn't alone in this. Over the next few days, things moved fast. Lucy subpoenaed HOA financials. Christina filed our court motion. Meanwhile, I started digging through HOA public disclosures, what little they actually reported. Most of it was sanitized nonsense. Tree trimming expenses, holiday light reimbursements, welcome baskets. But one line item jumped out. Consulting services, Granite Apex LLC, recurring payments totaling $118,000 annually. I couldn't find a damn thing about that company. No website, no employees, registered in Nevada. That smelled rotten. I called Tony again. "You know anything about Granite Apex?" There was a long pause, then a whisper. "Yeah, that's Sharon's nephew's company, Shell Corp. Everyone on the board knows." My jaw clenched. "Where's the money going?" "You won't like the answer." He was right, because later that week Christina got her hands on leaked budget drafts, ones that weren't meant for public eyes. A contact of hers, a disillusioned admin clerk from the HOA management company, had slipped them to her anonymously. The documents were wild. Community Enrichment Travel Fund, $32,000 to a so-called property management conference in Maui. Security Expansion Project, $15,000 to install surveillance at 3 homes, all of them board members. Emergency Retention Bonus, paid to Sharon, Calvin, and one other name I didn't recognize. None of it matched what the HOA had reported publicly. None of it was legal. So we started building the case, brick by brick. Christina prepped a dossier. Lucy followed the money trail. I supplied the video footage, logs, interviews. We even collected statements from 3 residents who admitted they'd been pressured to vote for the gate policy or risk fines for petty violations. It wasn't just greed, it was systemic. Meanwhile, Sharon and Calvin were doubling down. I received another warning letter accusing me of trespassing by driving around the gate via the back trail, a path that wasn't even HOA land. They threatened legal action. I sent back a handwritten note. "I look forward to seeing you in court. Bring sunscreen. You're going to burn." By now I was checking my cameras religiously. I'd installed 3 more, one facing the gate, one covering the east trail, and one under the big oak by the fence. I caught Calvin driving past my gate at 2 a.m. with his headlights off, just creeping, looking. We'd rattled the nest. That week, Christina called me late at night, excited. "We got it," she said. Lucy traced Granite Apex's funds. They route through 3 dummy accounts and end up in a private investment portfolio held by Sharon Brixton. Guess what the portfolio's called? I waited. HOA Growth and Legacy. "You can't make this shit up." The next morning, Lucy called again. "Formal investigation is live. You'll start seeing movement soon." And oh, we did. But that's another chapter. It didn't take long before the walls started closing in on the Fox Run Ridge brass. Within 72 hours of Lucy's investigation going live, subpoenas were flying like mosquitoes in summer. County records, HOA meeting transcripts, personal bank account disclosures. Lucy wasn't playing chess. She was playing poker with a flamethrower. Meanwhile, the HOA board acted like nothing was happening. They hosted their usual community wine and cheese social like their asses weren't halfway to federal indictment. I wasn't invited, of course, neither formally nor informally, but I had eyes everywhere. And by eyes, I mean Matt Lane, a quiet software engineer who lived 2 houses inside the HOA boundary and had grown real tired of being overcharged for landscaping services he never requested. Matt had spent 3 years maintaining the HOA's digital infrastructure, payment portals, access control logs, community email servers. He knew exactly where the skeletons were buried and, more importantly, how to dig them up without leaving fingerprints. He showed up at my property one afternoon, pale and wide-eyed, with a flash drive in his hand. "You didn't get this from me," he said before I could even say hello. I plugged it into my laptop, and there it was, the source code for the gate control system, including a list of all vehicle registrations blocked manually. My name was on there, on Bob Manning, access denied, manual override by Calvin Todd, timestamp 11:42 a.m. July 9. Right after our first meeting. "So he targeted me directly," I muttered, zooming in on the log. Matt nodded. "It's worse. There's a hidden admin panel only Calvin and Sharon use. They can block and unblock vehicles in real time. No board vote, no transparency." He scrolled further. "Oh, and check this out. There's a whitelist. Sharon's yoga instructor, never pays. Her daughter's boyfriend, unlimited access. It's all rigged." We copied everything and encrypted it in 3 backups. Mine, Christina's, and one off-site. I also made a little gift version, just in case. But that same night I got hit again. It started with a text alert. "Gate access request failed. Vehicle not authorized." Then came the cameras. Mine, not theirs. The footage showed 2 men in dark hoodies walking along the edge of my fence line at 1 in the morning. They didn't break in, but they scoped the place out, flashed lights at the surveillance signs, and walked off like it was just a casual nighttime stroll. Only it wasn't. The message was clear. Back off. So naturally, I did the opposite. I drafted a formal motion to the county court requesting an emergency injunction against the HOA, citing both the illegal roadblock and the retaliatory actions. Christina submitted it with a supplemental affidavit from Matt, anonymously filed, detailing how the gate system was used as a weapon. The judge responded fast. Within 48 hours, we had a temporary restraining order against the HOA, forcing them to grant me unrestricted road access or face $5,000 in daily fines. I tested it the next morning, pulled up to the gate, and nothing happened. I honked, waited. Then slowly, reluctantly, the barrier arm lifted, like it hated me personally. I drove through slow, watching the mounted camera track me like a prison guard watching a parolee. I wasn't free, not yet, but I had cracked the first wall. Of course, Sharon didn't take it lightly. She called an emergency HOA meeting. Residents were told it was about neighborhood safety. But we had a mic in the room thanks to Matt and his little network switch trick. The recording was gold. "Sharon, we have to find out who leaked those files. If this gets to the IRS, we're toast." Calvin, "We might need to lawyer up. Bob's making noise, and that lawyer of his is no pushover." Unidentified voice, "Why don't we just settle with him quietly? Offer him an access exemption and keep this internal?" Sharon, "No. If we give in, it unravels everything we hold." He blinks. Except I didn't. Instead, I sent a copy of the audio to Lucy. 2 days later, Sharon got her first visit from the IRS. Calvin, too. They weren't arrested, not yet, but you could smell the sweat through the cul-de-sac. At the same time, Christina got a call from a local news station. Turns out someone, maybe Tony, maybe Matt, maybe just a bored resident with a conscience, had leaked our filings to the media. Suddenly, the story wasn't just about a toll gate. It was about financial fraud, personal enrichment, and abuse of authority inside a suburban micro-government. And the cherry on top? The gate was still up, still functioning, still collecting payments from other non-member pass-throughs. So I stood by that gate one evening, camera rolling, and filmed as it opened for Sharon's luxury SUV and slammed shut on a local plumber who just needed to get to his client. I posted the video with the caption, "Some pigs are more equal than others. HOA gate, day 47. It got picked up. Views climbed into the tens of thousands. The HOA's Facebook page was flooded with angry comments. Residents started demanding audits. Neighbors who once avoided me now knocked on my door asking, "What can we do?" That weekend, Calvin was voted out as treasurer during a hastily organized emergency session. Publicly, they claimed he stepped down due to personal health issues. Yeah, sure he did. Matt called me the next day. "They're panicking. I think they're starting to eat each other." I smiled, poured myself a whiskey, and leaned back in my chair. "Good," I said. "Let them chew." The morning the subpoenas turned into arrests, the air felt different. It wasn't just the October breeze or the smell of burned leaves from someone's over-enthusiastic backyard bonfire. No, it was the subtle hush that settled over Fox Run Ridge like a blanket made of awkward silences and deleted group chats. Word spread fast. IRS agents, 2 black SUVs and a plain white van, rolled through the gated entrance like it wasn't even there. They parked right outside the HOA's makeshift office, and by 9 a.m., Sharon Brixton was being led out in handcuffs, still wearing her silk robe and flip-flops that said, "Blessed." Calvin followed 10 minutes later, less defiant, more like a guy who knew damn well this was the day his fake empire crumbled. They weren't the only ones. By noon, 3 more board members, not on 2, had been detained. One tried to sneak out the back with a box of documents, only to be greeted by an agent with a warrant and a deadpan. Nice try. I didn't dance. I didn't gloat. I just watched it all from the tailgate of my truck, sipping coffee like it was a courtroom latte. Matt sat beside me, a half smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "They're really doing it," he said. "Yep." "Think they'll flip on each other?" "Oh, without question." Lucy confirmed it later that day. They had enough to move forward with the informal fraud charges. Misuse of HOA funds, falsified accounting, and deliberate obstruction of easement access in violation of both state property law and IRS regulations. But we weren't done, not even close. Because once the surface was scratched, the rot underneath started gushing out like pus from a wound. Turns out, Granite Apex LLC wasn't the only fake contractor they were funneling money through. There were 2 more shell companies, one run by Sharon's hairdresser's boyfriend, another traced to a P.O. box in Vegas with no listed employees, and the infrastructure shortfall they'd tried to patch with toll collections. It wasn't due to rising road costs or inflation. It was a crypto collapse. They dumped nearly $180,000 of reserve funds and into a blockchain startup run by Sharon's cousin, a 23-year-old with a neck tattoo and 0 engineering credentials. The money was gone in 4 months. Poof. That's when they started brainstorming how to diversify revenue streams. Enter the toll gate. They pitched it to residents as necessary for safety and fiscal responsibility, held a closed-door vote with minimal notice, and rigged the minutes so dissenters didn't show up on the record. Lucy's team even uncovered internal memos, where Calvin referred to non-member drivers like me as low-hanging fruit. One email read, "If they don't pay, they don't drive. Let's monetize these freeloaders already." Charming. With arrests made and the financial evidence in hand, the state attorney general's office got involved. Christina called me the next morning, nearly breathless. "You're not gonna believe this," she said. "The AG's considering RICO charges." My eyebrows shot up. Organized crime. Corruption, embezzlement, collusion. They're treating the HOA board like a racket. And honestly, that's exactly what it was. The gate was still up, though. See, after the arrests, a temporary board, cobbled together from whatever residents were willing to step up, was scrambling to figure out what to do. Half of them wanted to immediately shut it down and issue refunds. The other half were terrified of lawsuits or accidentally triggering more IRS attention. So the gate stayed, glitchy, confused, opening at random, billing the wrong people. It had become a Frankenstein toll monster, groaning with bureaucracy. That's when I had an idea. I called Matt. "Hey," I said, "what if we gave the gate one last chance to serve the community?" He chuckled. "You're gonna love this." 3 hours later, he showed up with a wireless laptop, a toolkit, and a mischievous sparkle in his eye. We parked near the utility box, rerouted the signal, and uploaded a modified access script. It wasn't a hack, not really, just a nudge. From that point on, the gate opened automatically for every car that approached. Except one. Sharon's. When her husband came to collect her mail in their Range Rover, the gate refused to lift. It beeped, buzzed, and printed a receipt from the attached kiosk that read, "Access denied. Your HOA privileges have been revoked. Please contact Karma." The next day, I posted the footage online with the caption, "HOA, now accepting apologies." The video went viral, but the real turning point came when a Channel 5 News did a full investigative segment on the scandal. The anchor, dead serious, opened with, "What happens when your homeowners association becomes a criminal enterprise?" Tonight we take you inside the suburban fraud scheme that turned one private road into a federal crime scene. After that, the community flipped. The temporary board voted to dismantle the gate permanently. Refunds were issued. The HOA's charter was placed under state supervision. And Sharon? She made bail but had to wear an ankle monitor, and hilariously couldn't cross the county line to her favorite nail salon. That week, a neighbor I'd never met, a quiet woman named Linda who'd always kept to herself, brought me a pie and said, "Thank you for not letting them get away with it." I nodded, accepted the pie, and thought, we're not done yet. Because as satisfying as the arrests were, I still had one more mission. It was time to make sure this never happened again. When I got the call from Ashley Rogers, I was knee-deep in mud, wrestling a busted irrigation valve with more rage than precision. The phone buzzed in my back pocket 3 times before I gave in, wiped my hand on my jeans, and answered with a grunt that barely qualified as human. "Mr. Manning, this is senatorial candidate Ashley Rogers. I've been following your case closely." My first thought was, great, another journalist fishing for a quote. But her voice was different. Professional, yes, but warm. And not the fake kind you get from used car commercials. "I think what you've done is important," she said. "And I'd like to meet with you if you're open to it." I agreed, mostly out of curiosity, and maybe a little spiteful satisfaction that my HOA war had gotten so big even the suits in the State House couldn't ignore it. We met at a quiet cafe near the courthouse. No cameras, no fanfare. Ashley wore jeans and boots, hair in a ponytail, and carried herself like someone who'd seen a few fights of her own. "Your case has hit a nerve," she said over coffee. "People are tired of these suburban fiefdoms acting like private governments." "You're telling me," I muttered. She smiled. "I want to introduce a bill next session that puts tighter regulations on HOA financial transparency, limits their ability to install pay-to-access systems, and strengthens protections for property owners with easements. And I want to make your case the face of that campaign." I stared at her. "You want me to be the poster boy for HOA reform?" "Only if you want to be. But I think people need to see that fighting back is possible." I agreed. Not because I cared about politics, hell, I barely voted half the time, but because I'd seen what silence allowed. I'd seen how easy it was for a bunch of half-bored retirees with too much time and too little oversight to build themselves a kingdom on a foundation of fear and fake invoices. Within a week, I was standing behind a podium at a press conference outside the state capitol. Cameras flashed. Reporters shoved mics in my face. Ashley stood beside me, steady and composed. I told my story straight. No polish, no PR buzzwords. I told them how my grandfather had carved that road out with his bare hands in a battered John Deere. How we'd honored the easement for 8 damn decades. How the HOA came in, installed a gate, slapped a price tag on my access, and called it policy. And then I told them what came next. The surveillance, the intimidation, the shell companies, the luxury getaways paid for with other people's dues. The response was overwhelming. Emails, messages. People from across the state, even other states, reaching out to say they'd faced similar nightmares. Some were still fighting, others had given up, but they all said the same thing. Finally, someone said it out loud. While the political side picked up steam, the legal side kept rolling. Christina Pope, now riding a career high, pushed for full restitution, not just for me, but for every homeowner who'd been charged under the gate scheme. We filed a class action civil suit against the HOA's board, past and present, for misappropriation, civil fraud, and malicious interference with property rights. Lucy, meanwhile, had escalated her end of the investigation. Sharon Brixton's financials told a long and winding tale. Multiple vacations marked as strategic board retreats, personal shopping trips tagged as decor refreshes, and over $97,000 transferred to a personal account labeled Consultant Reserves. The IRS didn't find that label amusing. By the end of the month, a federal grand jury indicted Sharon and 2 others, one on multiple counts, including tax fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy. Calvin Todd cut a deal, spilled every bean he had in exchange for a lighter sentence. He cried during the testimony, "I didn't feel a damn thing." In the background, Fox Run Ridge slowly began to recover. The gate had been removed, not just unlocked, not just neutralized, but physically dismantled. A few overzealous volunteers held a community restoration barbecue and let residents take turns hitting the gate arm with a sledgehammer. I was invited to swing first. I declined, but I did show up. And I watched as people laughed, cheered, and hit that damn metal beam like it owed them child support. It wasn't justice, but it was catharsis. Matt, still living quietly under the radar, handed me a USB with the original source code, just in case anyone ever tried that crap again. I sealed it in a mason jar and buried it under the oak tree next to my shed. Seemed fitting. And then one morning, without warning, the mailbox coughed up a letter from the Doe Attorney General's office. Not a subpoena, a certificate of recognition. For demonstrated courage and persistence in defending the rights of private property owners. I had to laugh. Me. a dirt-covered, road-weary, coffee-addicted rancher who barely used email unless it involved tractor parts, now being thanked by the state for not backing down. I pinned the certificate inside my garage right next to my vintage no trespassing sign. And when the news broke that Ashley Rogers had officially won her seat in the state Senate, she sent me a handwritten note. "Thanks for giving them hell. I'll take it from here." A few months after the storm passed, after the cameras left and the reporters chased fresh outrage somewhere else, I stood at the edge of my land, sipping sweet tea and looking down the hill at where the gate used to be. All that was left now was a rectangular patch of dirt, a few broken concrete chunks, and a lonely post that someone had spray-painted with the words, "No kings, no tolls." Seemed about right. What used to be a toll booth was now a picnic area. I'd built a little pavilion there out of reclaimed barnwood, added a grill, a weatherproof Bluetooth speaker, and a handmade sign that read, "Access restored, community welcome." I decided to throw a party. Nothing fancy, just a proper send-off for the biggest headache of my adult life. I called it the Murtilante Gate Memorial BBQ. Flyers went up at the local hardware store and coffee shop. I invited everyone, friends, enemies, former HOA members, the ones who didn't end up indicted, even Sharon, who was now under house arrest with a GPS bracelet and, according to rumor, developing a stress-induced gluten intolerance. She didn't RSVP, probably for the best. By 5 p.m., the place was packed. Matt showed up early with his laptop and a playlist labeled Corporate Fraud Hits. The first song, "Take the Money and Run." Of course, Tony brought 3 racks of ribs and a bottle of moonshine he swore was only for emergencies. Christina arrived straight from court, still in her suit, and devoured a plate of pulled pork like she'd just won a war, which technically she had. And then there was Moker de to Lucy. She walked up the hill with her sleeves rolled up, a cherry pie in one hand and a 6-pack of beer in the other. "You got a permit for this gathering?" she asked with a perfectly straight face. "Nope," I said. "But I've got pie immunity." She smirked. "I'll allow it." As the sun dipped below the tree line, someone lit a fire in the old barrel I'd converted into a pit. We passed around stories, drinks, jokes, and at one point a printed copy of the HOA's original toll fee notice, laminated, of course, which we all took turns throwing into the flames. I didn't say much that night, didn't need to, just watched, listened, and let the sound of freedom, real freedom, not the HOA version, settle over the crowd. Late into the evening, after most folks had left, Ashley Rogers arrived, fresh off a long session in the Capitol. She walked up with a tired smile and a folder under her arm. "I just came from the governor's desk," she said, handing me a signed copy of the new legislation. The Homeowner Oversight and Access Protection Act. Unofficially nicknamed the Manning Bill. "First law I've ever had named after me," I muttered. "Hopefully the last," she said. "You break anything else, I don't want to have to draft a second one." We both laughed. As the fire burned low, someone queued up Johnny Cash. Lucy leaned against the truck, singing under her breath. Christina was asleep in a folding chair. Matt was trying to beat some kid at cornhole, and Tony, bless him, had fallen face first into a plate of baked beans. It was perfect. Not polished, not picturesque, but honest. Free. Mine. The road was quiet now. No cameras, no sensors, no gate demanding a fee for the right to live. Just a simple stretch of gravel winding its way home. Before I turned in for the night, I walked to the edge of the hill, lit one last cigarette, and drove a metal stake into the ground. At the top, I nailed a custom-made sign I'd had crafted just for the occasion. It read, "Private road, public spirit, tolls burned here." And beneath it, in smaller print, Established 1947, reclaimed 2025. Then I tipped my hat to the stars, flicked the last ember of ash into the wind, and walked back inside, leaving the gate, the war, and the past exactly where they belonged, behind me.